free, buddy.
Hi, friends from Salt Lake City, Utah.
It's Thank God I'm Atheist.
The podcast.
I'm Frank Feldman.
And filling in for Dan Beecher, I'm Kate Birch.
And coming up on the show today, we're going to be talking about, okay, let's set the stage a little bit. I suggest this almost every year.
I love it.
And Dan always puts the kibosh on it, which is I like New Year's resolutions.
I love them. I love New Year's resolutions.
I just think that it's a fun time to talk about maybe a little self-betterment.
Totally.
And like becoming a better person.
Yeah, fresh start of yourself.
Because you want to be.
I love that.
And you have things, new year, new you. You want to just work on some things.
I love it.
We're going to talk about it, why we think it's kind of a cool thing, and we're going to share a few as well. I love it. But before we do that, should we have you start?
Yeah. I'd be glad to start.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to preface this by saying, have you ever heard of ASMR?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody has, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure if there's anybody out there who has not heard of it, it stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. And it's funny because I actually have a severe reaction to it. That's like the opposite of what a lot of people get. Like, I know a lot of people love it and it's like so soothing to them. And for me, it almost makes me filled with rage.
Oh God.
I actually think I have a syndrome. I've looked it up and I can't remember what the syndrome's called, but it's the opposite. It does the complete opposite of what it should do for people. Mm-hmm. And it makes you want claw eyes out. Anyway, I have that. But maybe that's why I thought this was an interesting story, because it's all about, apparently there's a new movement of specifically Christian ASMR. Which
okay, but let's first sort of really get into like what it kind of sounds like.
Okay, so right? I'm gonna I think this is kind of what it is. It's soothing talking, and there's a lot of clicky sounds, and it's
lots of fingernails on.
Yeah, there's a lot of people will the typewriter sounds or mouth sounds, which mouth sounds are literally. Drinking or eating sounds, I want to murder when I hear that. But apparently it's super comforting to some people.
I really don't get it. There's a real creep factor because it's almost always young girls, women, young women, on the verge of being girls. Yeah. A lot of them. Yeah. Because there was actually one that was this 12-year-old girl.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I watched this takedown video of it that was hysterical.
I could watch that.
Yeah. And so there's this thing where it's it seems there's something sexual.
Yeah. And it feels that way to me.
And I don't quite get, but I know that it's not. And so it puts me on edge.
It puts me on edge too.
I'm
100%.
just I don't know what this is.
And what, yeah.
It's kind of creeping me out because it's all this, whisper.
I know.
And it's
I feel I'd be kind of maybe good at it. I kind of want to do it just because I hate it. That's a weird response to it. Anyway, but for some people, they love it. It gives them this tingle that goes up their spine.
Okay.
And it's, some people have likened it to having your hair played with or your back tickled. I love those things. Give me that any day. But And how nice would it be to have something you could listen to that would give you that experience? But for me, most sounds, if I don't just think they're fine and like them, annoy me. It's nails on the chalkboard. Okay. So there's this movement towards this Christian ASMR, and they all have really funny names.
Okay, Christian ASMR.
Yeah, so I think
they're rubbing two crucifixes together to make the soothing sounds.
Praying hands. I love this. They're just turning the pages of the Bible really loudly. No, so I think basically what it is people reading scripture, verses of things, or saying prayers quietly.
So it's just whisper prayers.
It's basically, I think it's whisper prayer and whisper scripture.
Okay.
But people are loving them. In fact, one of them is called Christian Whispers.
Gross. I don't like this at all.
Oh, I don't either. One of them's called The Healing Word. I mean, they're like, I could imagine there being like Saturday Night Live skit about this.
Oh,
it feels like it's screaming for something like that. And there's a woman, I think she read like the whole Gospel of Mark and the Book of Ruth. And
in whisper
form. And I don't know why this is so funny to me, but I don't know the books of the Bible well enough to know like what's going on in those books. But I can imagine like this comforting whisper talk where they're like beheading. I don't know, like what are the murderous books of the Bible? But I think that
right.
the thought of her reading those and like this soothing thing, and it being like completely the words being completely counter to that kind of is hilarious to me. But anyway, I think that actually the most interesting part of this story is, so a lot of people have done research on ASMR, and it triggers these parts in the brain that are associated with like reward and emotional arousal. And there was some researchers at the University of Utah, where we live, who were studying actually Mormon people's brains when they were like involved in like devotional practices. So I don't know if they were like praying, or I'm guessing they were probably praying or reading scriptures because they had to probably be in an MRI or something. But during those times, the areas of the brain that were triggered during those that were activated were really similar to the ones triggered during ASMR. Oh. And so, people claim to have those good feelings that they get, that they associate with God, are triggered, through ASMR. It's just interesting to me that, that you can almost replicate that God feeling. Yeah. What if people could just switch it out for soft talking or like licking donuts or something? I don't know. Like, so, you can replicate this, basically this feeling.
Cranial massage.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's basically the same. The funny thing is that these Christian ASMR people are giving people these feelings and then validating that they think it's coming from God instead of coming from just like a place in the brain that's like, triggering it. That's
devious.
That is devious, but like it does make me think, wouldn't it be cool if people could learn how to have that same arousal that is beneficial to them or that feels good to them in ways that they don't associate with God. That seems pretty great. Yeah. That could be a good substitution.
I think that's awesome.
Anyway, super interesting.
Okay. All right. Well, going to head to Afghanistan.
Oh, good luck.
Where I would like you, not personally.
Be safe.
This story, however, comes from Afghanistan. Where the Taliban, of course, have taken over, and they're like I loved in the first moments when they're like, no, this time it's going to be different. Yeah, totally. And it's like, you're going to respect women this time.
No, really, we're going to.
I would like you to finish this sentence for me.
Okay, I'll try.
Right? Kind of we'll fill in the blank.
Okay.
The Taliban have ordered the decapitation of blank.
Oh, I'm going to go with...
How would you finish that?
Female police officers.
Mannequins. And it's totally for real. Apparently shop owners in Afghanistan had already sort of anticipated that mannequins were going to be a problem. In fact, I think we've talked about it on the show.
Oh, I had no idea that this was a thing.
In Islam, you can't replicate human form.
But the bodies are okay.
Apparently. Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. So a lot of shopkeepers had started putting scarves over the head, and then having the clothes. Yeah. Some had actually just put bags over the head, which... Hey, that's a good look, right?
They're like promoting captured. Terrorists have captured these people, these mannequins.
This is our Abu Ghraib line of for fall this year. They've some videos hit the social media showing men sawing heads off of shop dummies. And it's caused a lot of scorn and criticism, both inside and out of the country.
But does it say what they're doing with all the heads? Because now I'm just like really curious.
Just this pile of heads.
Yeah.
I would assume they're
burning
or heading to a landfill or something.
Because they still exist.
Yeah. What
difference does it make?
You got to destroy it. You can't have any images of human form. Which, again,
the body is the human form, too.
But maybe because it's covered.
But you were saying they covered the head and that wasn't working.
Yeah, that's true. Well, they don't want any. They probably don't want that. That seems like you're kind of being a little sneaky, right? They want the heads gone so they know there are no heads on display in Afghanistan because that is bad.
I was terrified. I was terrified of mannequins when I was a little girl.
Really? Mm-hmm. They're kind of creepy.
Oh, they were so scary to me. But it was actually the heads that scared me the most. So maybe I was meant to be in Afghanistan as a child. I was so afraid of the heads.
No, nobody was meant to live through this kind of regime.
No, it's absurd.
It's only going to get worse before it gets better in Afghanistan. In all ways, like it's a humanitarian disaster. There's famine is setting in. There's no money to get any supplies of anything into the country. It's a terrible disaster.
And in a way, the Taliban, I'm going to liken them in a weird way to the Mormon Church. Because hear me out. You know how in our state, the Mormon Church said, send, your welfare recipients to us. We'll take care of them. Yeah. I'm not sure if this is true, but I feel like maybe I heard something along the lines of the Taliban liking when people are in need, and then they have to be the ones to fill it because then you get people who are in need of you. Oh, and God. Then they rely on your services. Oh, so...
Well, they're definitely creating plenty of need.
Yes.
I mean, we didn't help in that regard as a nation, and I don't know how I feel about, all of our policy toward Afghanistan right now, but these poor people. Oh, I cannot imagine living in a regime that's that sort of controlling and ridiculous. Yeah, when they're absolutely fucking ridiculous.
When they're that nitpicky about the things that are, that they're seeing as problematic, when that's like probably the easiest, most simple thing, and that is still a problem. Yeah.
Just file the nipples off like they did at ZCMI here in Salt Lake.
Did they do that?
The Mormons, because the Mormon Church owned ZCMI, which was a department store.
That they filed the
and they got like
off.
This shipment of mannequins in that were a little too
a little pokey, a little excited.
Yeah, exactly.
A little cold.
Yeah.
Chilly.
And so somebody complained and they ordered all the mannequins to have the nipples
I love the thought.
Filed off.
But I'm imagining that being somebody's job. I want to see the person standing there filing the nipples.
You compare like the Taliban to the Mormon Church. I mean,
similar.
It's kind of
oddly similar.
It's not exactly the same thing, but yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, this next story of mine isn't as colorful, let's say, as your story. But I did come across this very interesting article that I would almost recommend for people to look up, just because I think that they might find it interesting. And it's basically a timeline of all the a lot of the prayers that had been recorded on January 6th during the insurrection.
Prayers from whom?
From all sorts of people. So like people that were just like on the rotunda, people who like in the Senate.
But like the insurrectionists themselves.
Both. Well, that, and apparently there's like a bazillion chaplains, It's crazy that, we have prayers going on at the beginning of every session. But this was just a really odd take, seeing both of these like separate entities who are presumably praying to the same God, kind of asking for similar things and aware of each other in peculiar ways. We know that it's completely useless, but it's it's just this weird like glimpse inside how bizarre religion is. Anyway, so I just want to kind of go through it a little bit and read a few with you just because I think it's this interesting insight.
Okay.
So the religious news services are the ones who had kind of collected all these. They collected videos and documents and interviews and news reports and compiled this list. So if you want to look into it more, you can look that up. So I'm going to start with this Florida pastor who was the pastor for the White House. You'll remember her, Paula White, and the opening of the Trump rally on that day. And this was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and she's kind of one of the first recorded prayers of that day. Okay. And she's giving this to the attendees right before Trump comes out to talk. And I'm going to just quote some of this for you so that you can kind of get the tone. Because I think it's interesting, the different tones that they have, like the similarity yet differences. So she says, God, you said you honor your word and your name above all things. So as we hold you in covenant with you today, let justice be done. Let justice be done. We, the people, have an assurance of a fair and just election. Hear our cry and turn our hearts to you, God. I pray that you would turn the hearts of those who are in power and position to make decisions, to walk in your wisdom and do justice justly today for the integrity of democracy and for our nation. So, firstly, I find it crazy that as somebody is petitioning God for justice, yet is so blind to the fact that even if they were given like the reality that Biden won, and it's like, okay, how would you know if God was saying to you, well, actually Biden won and I'd like him to be sworn in. It's like they are not going to even listen to God. If God came down in like some fiery, like, I don't know, vision,
right, and
said to them, Biden won the election, Trump actually was voted out, they'd be like throwing rocks at God.
Yeah. No. Somehow, and it's amazing, their wants and God's wants always are in alignment.
Yeah, it's just whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they never stop to ask themselves, why is it that God always wants the same thing that I want?
Yeah, it's so weird.
Or maybe am I projecting my wishes?
Yeah, I asked God to have Trump win and he lost, but God probably meant for him to win.
Clearly.
So let's ask again.
So there must be demons.
Maybe I wasn't clear enough the first time. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the prayer. This happens around noon, so about an hour later, to certify the election. And this is given by a Presbyterian minister. Anyway, I feel like this is interesting in its own right. So it says, "Oh God, our refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of discord and trouble. Mountains crumble, waters rage, nations roar, and yet we need not be afraid, for even now you abide with us in these times of great discord, uncertainty, and unrest." And I'm like, this feels so ironic because literally in like a couple hours, they are going to be fearing for their life.
Yeah.
And so they've just said this prayer. This is the thing. I feel like they're all so clueless in how literally none of their prayers are ever answered in any way at all. Right. It's like the things that happen in both cases feel like completely, why even waste our time praying to this God, right? It's like, it feels like they're just a waste of time. So it goes on and on. They have in this, as it moves forward in time, one of the people that they have recorded praying is one of the Oath Keepers. And I think it might be the QAnon shaman. Remember him? He's like, to me, kind of the face of the insurrection.
Oh, yeah.
With the painted thing and the
horns. Yeah. Bare-chested.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, he once they were in the Capitol Rotunda, he was they have a recording of him praying. And I love how he starts off his prayer. He's like, "Hey guys, let's pray." Then he says, "Father God, thank you. Thank you for each other. Thank you for letting us stand up for our country and what we believe in. Guide us so we may do your will. I pray for that, and I pray for these brothers that stand beside me in the name of Jesus. Amen." God didn't answer your prayer, dude.
Yeah.
At all. And if people could just step back and look at all the times that God is not answering their prayers, even remotely. Anyway, this is really interesting for people to look through. It's just a funny timeline of seeing, like, you imagine all the prayers that were being sent up, like, simultaneously. There's all these prayers going on with the people outside. They're all praying to, like, their team God.
Yeah.
And then inside there's all these people fearing for their life, praying to their team God to be protected. And everybody thinks that God is gonna, it's like this jingoistic, version of God.
Yeah.
Who's gonna protect their version of reality.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anybody any good ever. It's just absurd.
And they never stop to think about it and to try to reconcile.
And they never think
all of the different prayers.
Exactly.
Right? Like how is it that there's all of this different praying going on, conflicting, and yet they all believe in the same God.
They all believe in the same God. Yeah. And none of their prayers were answered.
And they're all wrong about what that God wants. I mean, clearly that God doesn't exist, so it doesn't want anything. But like they all have conflicting ideas.
Yeah.
About like who this God is, and yet it's this. Well, I guess there's Father God and what, Jesus God. Like
I feel like they mainly conflate those two, though, don't they?
Well,
I don't know.
If you believe in the Trinity,
yeah.
Which anyway,
let's not
go down that road.
Anyway, it was an interesting timeline of that day. We've seen so many different timelines of January 6th, and I had not seen the prayer timeline yet, and I was like, that's pretty interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is this article grabbed my attention because it's about a topic that I hold dear to my heart, which is beauty pageants.
Are you pro beauty pageant?
No.
Oh, okay.
I hate beauty pageants. I think they're really, really where to start, right? With what's wrong with beauty pageants.
But you do get those wonderful videos. Like, what was the girl who was talking about like North? The map. What is that video? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
No,
darn
I
it.
try to avoid these kind of things.
Okay, I'm going to find it and send it to you. And I'm sure, like, I'm not articulating it well, but I know your listeners know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, so apparently in Africa, it's the Miss University Africa competition.
Okay.
It's a non-bikini, continent-wide beauty pageant.
Good.
And they've now had a couple women who've won while wearing a hijab. Okay. And this article makes a big deal about it. And it takes this stance of like, isn't this great?
So progressive that women's beauty can be even without their hair showing. It's amazing.
I know. And and more than that, they're talking about it's inner beauty.
Right.
Right. Which is also, flowy or nicely styled hair.
Yeah.
It complements a woman and her looks, I guess.
Sure.
Right. But it's also like part of this. The reason that beauty pageants are so awful to me is that I know there's like a male equivalent kind of sorta, but
there?
Not really.
Oh, I don't think there is.
There's like Mr. Such and Such competitions, but it's always more like a fitness thing rather than like all these different talents. And, look how well spoken she is, or look how many talents she has.
Look what a trophy wife she would be.
She's so poised. She knows when to keep her mouth shut, right?
Exactly.
And it's just this it's this idea of like in one way, like people who like in this article who are like, oh, this is great. Like it's this like progressive thing where like you were saying, and it's like, well, no, but you shouldn't, people who are like, I just want my inner beauty on show, on display as part of this competition. Like I guess you don't know what's going on here. This is about oogling and women and objectifying women and putting women on this weird pedestal. It's just like it's all just such a mess, right?
Otherwise, couldn't it just be like an essay contest? Submit your essay.
Right. But then like the pictures that go along with the article, it's not inner beauty.
No.
It's still women who are beautiful.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just they're wearing
their hair's covered.
Their hair's covered. And that's it.
Yeah.
And they're covered down to their wrists and their ankles.
Yeah.
And there's no bikini around.
Yeah.
It's still the exact same. Women are
objectified.
Objects.
Yeah.
Women are they're not participants in the greater society, right? That like they have to be like this, oh, look how precious.
Well,
look
and
how it's so offensive.
Well, that we're putting them up on stage and judging them in general.
Judging in general. Yeah. Like why, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like this is sick. Like unless it's like you're the, if you're like really good, you have like, if it was a talent show.
Sure.
Right.
We have those.
That's what it should be.
There are talent shows.
Miss USA should be strictly a talent show.
It's just America's Got Talent.
Yeah, well, I guess it could be that.
Right?
Yeah. Look, she juggles so well.
Yeah, she's a ventriloquist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, oh, God. And I, anyway, I don't want to harp on it too much because it's just so silly.
Well, the great thing, I was listening to some podcasts recently and it was about beauty pageants and Miss America in general and how viewership has just plummeted. And really, nobody cares about a beauty pageant anymore. It's just dying out. And so I think, even though they're still going in places and they're trying to reform them in ways that feel, more up to date and more feminist or whatever, it's a bygone thing. And it's kind of run its course. And I'm guessing that we'll be done with it pretty soon.
Well, and I'm sorry, I have a real problem with this. There is this notion with liberals, especially in this country, where creating a space for women to be subjugated and being forced to cover themselves is somehow a liberal thing.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like there's this liberal reaction in the United States about women covering. And it's the liberals who are cool with Islam in this country.
Oh, right. But I think that's just because they've been picked on.
And I know that's what it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you shouldn't like these women being forced to cover.
Yeah.
And I know women say the women who are covering say that it's their choice.
Right.
I don't buy it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this is part of religious indoctrination.
Well, yes.
And it's sick because you get the person to basically put on their own chains and their own shackles.
100%, 100%, because nobody's going to choose to do that if they weren't told to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you're not having men and women equally told to cover up in the same ways, then there's something problematic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
I know it is. Is it my turn to say my last?
Turn, yeah.
Okay. This story is funny and I love it. And it's about the Pope. And I feel like the Pope is always, this Pope is just always saying interesting things. And this one in particular, I love because I feel like you're almost there, buddy. You've almost figured it out. So,
okay.
So this happened this past week at the Feast of the Epiphany. I think it was last Thursday. And the Pope is basically saying his plans for the new year and for all the Catholics and kind of like what he hopes for them in this coming year. And in this, he says that he wants them to like think about their religion and he wants for them to set aside conventional, external, formal religiosity and embrace this like new path of religion. And so he's like, it seems like he's been thinking about his religion long and hard. And he's like, you know what? This thing is oppressive and like kind of sucks. And nobody's really that into it right now. So I'm going to read you this quote that he said that I just think is amazing because I want him to just read this quote back to himself like 10 times a day until he's like completely convinced himself that his religion is absurd.
Okay.
So he says, have we all been stuck too long, nestled inside a conventional, external, and formal religiosity that no longer warms our hearts and changes our lives? Do our words and our liturgies ignite in people's hearts a desire to move toward God, or are they a dead language that speaks only of itself and to itself? And I'm like, dude, yes, that is what your church does. That's exactly what it is. Wow. It is just speaking to itself. old things. I mean, it's just like, you're almost there.
Yeah.
Like one step further. I just love that he said this to all of his people. And then he goes on to say a couple more quotes that I just found so delightful. He's saying, the lack of desire only leads to sadness and indifference, to sad communities, sad priests or bishops. And then he says, it's sad when a priest has closed the door of desire, sad to fall into clerical functionalism. I'm like, are you listening to yourself? It is sad. We all think it's sad that you've stripped desire away from your priests. That's exactly what you've done.
If only they could.
Oh, if only they could listen to
get rid of desire in their priests.
Wow. Well, that's true. But when you're like, you're stripping away any way for them to perform.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh. It's just interesting, but I feel like this is such a prescient talk because it seems like, I'm guessing most religions right now are suffering with this exact same thing, which is they are seeing their religions die from the inside out, or from the outside in. Either way, it's shriveling. People aren't believing it the same way that they used to. We have so many things to build our lives upon that I don't think we need to build them on religion the way that people used to. And so they're probably seeing that people are doing these rote things. Their heart isn't in it.
They're not connecting.
They're not connecting. And I feel like, great. That's the kind of the death toll for religion, hopefully. Like this hopefully pretends things to come, you know?
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, can you reform it and keep people in? That's
the question.
Does it
even need to be?
Or is
what does it even mean?
Have people left religion for different reasons than the Pope thinks?
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what it kind of says to me.
Yeah.
Is that he doesn't understand why people are leaving.
Oh, I don't think he does. He recognizes
it.
Right.
He knows there's a problem.
Yeah.
He thinks it's because
they've lost passion about it. Yeah.
And let's face it, mass is boring.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, they just like being entertained all the time. And it's like, I don't think that's it. I don't think it's boredom.
Yeah.
Sir.
Well, I think he needs to listen to everything he said. Like, listen to the things he says. Listen when you tell people that they're being selfish because they want pets and not kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like, ask yourself some serious questions. Like, yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I got another Catholic Church story.
All right.
Also about priests and desire.
Oh,
and not good.
Okay.
There's some researchers down in Australia. They've put together a first of its kind project where they are mapping clerical pedophile networks.
Ooh.
Right. And they're finding that they are, quote, mafia-like.
Really?
Yeah.
In silencing people or in what way?
Silencing people and how they, there's like basically like vows of silence amongst like the priests who are in the know and who protect each other. Right. And then like with the moving people around in order to protect them.
Oh, yeah. That's gone on for a while. Right.
But let's see. They the first mapping effort has linked 99 clergy to 16 pedophile networks in the Melbourne and Ballarat, and it's another part of Australia, Ballarat diocese.
Wow.
It documents the oral histories of at least 50 survivors who maybe weren't sharing certain details because they didn't know that they were kind of important.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Oh.
And so the reason, as they're listening to these stories and they're like
noticing
like links.
Yeah.
And so they're putting they're connecting people in this network.
Oh, wow.
And they're finding that it was far more organized. Like we've shared stories on the show before about like there was this one group of pedophile priests that once they'd sort of groomed a young man or a boy rather, there was a specific crucifix gift that they would give him. And then he would be wearing it, and then it was a signal to other pedophile priests that he was an easy mark.
Oh my God.
And so so we know that there have been like really organized programs But this is like actually finding like that there was these networks throughout these dioceses, throughout nations, essentially. I wonder, at least in Australia, but they suspect that they want to take it on the global level and start making all of these connections to see how this web works. But they absolutely compare it to the mob. Well, they call them dark networks, which are other sort of organized kind of like groups.
Dark web sort
terrorist
of stuff?
Organizations have similar patterns. Youth gangs, drug trafficking rings, price fixing cartels, and other criminal enterprises will have apparently the pattern of this like network.
Interesting.
Is identical to the same kind of networks that these groups.
Yeah. So develop. I wonder. I don't know. I wonder how, I don't get really how they come up with that network. It sounds really interesting, but like, can they, once they kind of visually see the links between the people, I wonder how they're communicating. Is it all verbally? Do they send emails? Can they like search messages between people to like get
there's
proof
a lot of signs
things?
And signals, right, as to how they identify each other. And then the network, I think in this kind of case, you know who else is in the group.
But how do they know?
Well, apparently it starts a lot of times in seminary, right? When they're
it's kind of like
studying
a
to be
game
a priest,
of telephone, probably.
And they start to connect and find each other that early.
Wow.
And then they sort of know who each other are. They know who can be trusted, who can't be, and it's all word of mouth, right? And they connect, but they're doing it by interviewing the survivors and saying, well, he and he, those were the two that molested me.
And
right?
then they have other people had those exact same ones.
And connect through the survivors' stories.
Wow.
It's fascinating. It's it's such a horrifying topic.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
But what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, how cool.
To like be exposing it for what it is, which is a sick criminal network.
And hopefully it does go global and they end up, put an end to it. If that's even possible. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But wow.
Pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
Well, if you have anything to say about anything you've heard on the show so far or suggestions for things you'd like to hear on the show, please email us.
Yeah.
Our email address is podcast@thankgodimatheist.com. Or you could also leave us a voicemail message. The telephone number is 424-666-8442. We'd love to hear your voice. There's more show coming up, so please stick around. So, Kate.
Yes.
Now is the time on the show when we like to play audio.
This always makes me cringe every time I'm like preparing myself.
Well, it's funny. You say that and it like my cringe level is like super sensitive.
Yeah.
Right. Like I cringe.
Like your
so
butt
quick.
is just clenching right now.
I avoid this kind of stuff at all costs in my normal life.
Oh my gosh,
right?
Me too.
But for the sake of the show, we take a bullet for all of y'all.
We are very
so we
generous.
Can share some gems with you.
This is a gem,
and this one's really good.
Okay.
This is from Heidi St. John.
Okay.
I didn't know who she was.
I've never heard of her.
Look her up. She's a Christian author, homeschooler type.
Okay.
She apparently hits the Christian speaking circuit. She has stuff to say. She talks about family a lot.
Okay.
Big surprise. I do like the quick bio that I found of her mentioned that she's a Republican. Yeah, no shit.
What?
Once you hear what she has to
Never
say
would've guessed.
About public libraries.
Okay, let's do it.
God said, I made them male and female in my image. Mm-hmm. Yep. And we know that our children are image bearers of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And this is a spiritual attack against our children.
It is.
And so it's time for parents to tell the truth. We want to say, no, there are not more than two genders. There are are there anomalies? Yes. There are. There are all kinds of issues that are not out into the mainstream. But what's happened in the transgender movement is they're literally indoctrinating our children. You can go down to any public library. The public libraries are disastrous.
Yep.
They're actually evil organizations now because they're run by the American Library Association, which is a wicked organization at its root. And so I turned in my library card years ago. And for a homeschool mom to turn in her library card, it has to be pretty serious, you know? But I went down there and I was like, no, your bathrooms are not safe for my children anymore. The books that you're putting, you just saw it in the news again today, the books that you're putting up on the shelves for little children to read are dishonoring to the children, and they're dishonoring to parents. And they won't tell the parents what's inside these books. So the kids are sitting down and they're reading these books and they don't understand that they're slowly being lulled into a completely backwards way of thinking.
What I don't get is the part they won't tell parents what are in these books.
I know.
Like, is there some special ink that, like, if you're over 10, you can't read it or something?
Well, when you didn't learn to read yourself.
It's so crazy to me. It's like, guess what? When the kid's sitting down reading a book, you can be like, oh, I actually don't want you to read that one.
Yeah.
This is the thing I don't get about all these parents who want to ban books. It's like, just because you don't want your kid reading that doesn't mean somebody else doesn't want their child reading it. So just, how about your kid doesn't read it?
It's a public library. Yeah. There's more than you and your narrow-minded way.
And nobody's forcing you to read that book. How about you could skip past it and pick a different one?
I'm actually surprised to hear that there was a Christian who ever really liked
the public library. Yeah, I'm a little surprised about that too.
Like a conservative Republican Christian. Like, no, they don't like information, broad information.
Well, like they're saying, they don't. Please don't inform our children.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was hilarious in that clip too, when she's like, there's only 2 genders. Right. And then she's like, except for that there's actually not. And I'm aware of that. But like, God didn't mean to. Oh, but wait, everything he does is on purpose. So
I know.
You know?
Oh, golly. These people.
Yeah.
Oh, well, typically on the show at this point, we would do correspondence and thank new patrons. But with Dan out of town, I think we're just going to move on to our topic for the end of the show.
About our topic.
This is fun. I know. Here's the deal. We tease it at the beginning of the show. We want to talk about New Year's resolutions. And it doesn't have to be in the context of New Year's when you decide that you want to work on something.
Yeah.
But New Year's just gives such a great...
It's like a fresh...
Yeah.
Little,
there's a tradition of sort of looking forward. It's a part of it's
inward,
looking back.
And inward.
In.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure. And deciding how you want to maybe live going forward or maybe something you want to work on. And obviously the classics are that you want to lose some weight.
Totally.
Or whatever.
Eat better. Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
Drink less, which is why Drynuary exists.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't support Drynuary.
I don't either. I don't drink that much anyway, but it's like, I can handle it.
I like Wetnuary as wet as possible.
I like it too.
Yeah. But... yeah, so when I kind of was like, I sort of was like, I don't know, do you want to talk? You were really excited.
I was. It's funny to me, actually, that you said that you've proposed this to Dan many times, because literally every year I'm like, Dan, do you want to write New Year's resolutions with me? Like every year I ask him, and every year he's like, I don't do resolutions. Every year. He does not believe in New Year's resolutions. And I am like, so excited by them. Even knowing that like I will break probably a majority of them in the first week. But like, it doesn't matter if you break, 12. If you do one for a while, that's still one thing that you did.
Yeah. Well, you're trying on new habits.
Exactly.
Right?
You got to see what fits.
And if they don't work, they don't work, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to like torture yourself.
No,
right?
and I'm good at forgiving myself for my failures. Yeah. So it's like, it's not that big of a deal when I let myself down with them.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, for me personally, I don't formally ever sit down and do New Year's resolutions, but when the New Year comes along, I often sort of put a thought in my head.
I love that.
Of like, and it's usually just one, maybe 2 things of like, I really need to do X. And so for this year, I I adopted a new dog.
Yes.
And so part of it in my mind, I have a hard time getting out and just getting that minimal level of exercise that they say we're supposed to get.
I get that.
Like 100%. I have a really hard time with it.
Me too.
I just, and I'm a little bit of a hypochondriac. So
Me
like,
too.
We have so much in common. And so like, I'm always like, I am the most sedentary person in the world. And I know I'm not.
I am.
Right?
I bet it's me.
Okay, so
now
you're number
me.
one, I'm number two.
There we go.
All right, fair enough. And so like I just decided, I'm like, we don't have a yard, right? Our with our home. And so you have to take the dog for walks.
Right.
And so I'm like, it's not just going to be a little quick trip out. I really want to make like at least one block or make it all the way around one of our big giant Salt Lake City blocks
here are huge.
And that's a half mile if you go all the way around.
That's great.
And so I'm just starting with that twice a day.
That's a mile.
I'm trying to do.
That's awesome.
And hopefully like, that just gets my heart rate up.
I think it's great.
And
gets the dog out, gets extra
bonding time with the dog.
Yeah.
He loves it, although it's been so cold.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to keep it up. And the dog keeps you going, right?
I have a dog and I still don't do that. But I also have a yard. So, but my dog would be so happy if I took her for a walk every day.
Oh, yeah.
She needs it. I should do it for her, if not for myself.
And see, the way that I sometimes have to approach these things is I kind of externalize how it works, right?
Yeah.
Like I create this thing where this narrative of he needs to go on a walk.
Yeah. Somebody's depending on me.
I need to go on a walk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that having a 1-year-old dog also brings into your life, like I'm having like I get down on the ground and play with him and all this stuff. And so I just feel like I'm bending.
You're basically doing yoga.
I know.
You are doing yoga.
I'm doing like down dog.
Yeah. You're getting down with the dog.
With the dog.
Yeah.
No, and it seems really simple and maybe a little simplistic, but it's like I need these excuses because I won't do it on my own. Well, I just know I won't.
Yeah.
I'm in my late 40s, or Dan's gotten me saying I'm in my late 40s. I'm not. I'm in my mid 40s. And I just see this future of like just sitting around.
I know.
And I'm like, this can't happen.
I'm having the same dialogue in my head. Like the literally exact same dialogue in my head. So I get where you're coming from. Yeah. But the thing I think that's smart about what you're doing, and I think anytime like when we're talking about resolutions, is if you can find a way to incorporate something into your life where it feels more natural, like you were saying, like you're doing it for your dog, you're getting down, you're playing with your dog instead of being like, I'm forcing myself to do this amount of stretches per day or whatever. When it's like coming naturally like that, I feel like you're going to incorporate it into your life more easily. That's at least for my sort of personality type that.
Yeah.
Because one of my resolutions was to do yoga every day, and I did it for 5 days.
Oh.
And you can count how many days we are into this month. It's more than 5. So I already broke that one, which was, I'm like, that's not really that surprising that I was going to break that one. More importantly, one of my resolutions this year, so I think you and Dan talked about this a little bit maybe on your diary last week, but we've been talking a lot. I've been having this thought myself about expectations and how painful my expectations can be, like the amount of pain that they can cause in my life merely by having them. And I've always been a person who sort of like looks forward to things and has to know what's coming and like wants to be like really prescribed about knowing things and what's coming next and blah, blah, blah. And I think what I've realized lately is that the more I can let go of expectations just broadly about everything, doesn't mean that I am going to let go of like hoping for things or striving for things. Right. I can still have that. Different. But having like this prescribed expectation of I want this by then, and this is exactly how I want things to go. And if it doesn't go that way, I'm going to feel really bad about it. This is something I inherited from my like my mom's the same way. It's just kind of damaging to my personality. So one of the things I have this year is to really work on, not necessarily, like this isn't something I'm going to overcome necessarily this year, but I'm going to be more aware of it. And I'm going to ask myself questions. And when I see that I have an expectation about a thing, or I see that I've been hurt because of an expectation, I'm just going to take a step back. I'm going to look at it. And I'm really going to just be asking myself a lot of questions about that this year. So that's like one of the things, like that's it's kind of a more abstract change that I want to make. But I think that it's going to be an important one. And I think it's going to end up helping me in the long run a lot.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it.
See, I love this. And I think for me, okay, just to back up a little bit. Yeah. Like, people who are religious and go to church, they think that they go there and they get all this like instruction on how to be a better person. Right. They don't. They just tie themselves up in knots over
they have excuses.
Bad ideas about what morality is and all of that. But I just like the idea, because as atheists, we can just go and do and be, right? And it always turns out that probably the more ethical and moral people that you know in your life are the atheists, probably that are in your life. Yeah, that's been my experience. But I think that it's like, I like taking the opportunity to be introspective and say, what do I need? What can I work on as a human being, or just about me? Like, for me, mine's kind of a physical thing, right? Yours is more like this internal thing that you want to work on. And I just think that I just love the excuse to actually, and the reminder to do it.
Me too. I get excited by it every year. Like on the 31st of December, I'm always like that little excitement of like, this is a time, exactly like you said, where you get to step back, study yourself, and really ask yourself some serious questions about, like, you get one life. I mean, like, we, especially when you're an atheist, believe that you get one. You might as well put as much effort into it as you can to get what you want out of it. And so I love I also love that same excuse. Ask myself questions about what I want. Ask myself questions about who I want to be, whether it's to myself or within my relationships or whatever it is. And it's funny, like you brought up religion, and I think it's very interesting because it's almost like when you have that excuse of the morality built into your religion, it almost asks, you don't do that introspection, Right. You kind of, it's like, that's a step that's sort of taken away from you because your list is already there.
Right. Well, and the motivators are more guilt-based and shame-based rather than just feeling an inner push to be better. Yeah. Right? To work on yourself.
To strive towards something. Yeah. Yeah.
To have some expectations about the next year.
Isn't that ironic? I feel it is actually very funny. And I was thinking of that as I was saying it. Like, it's funny to say that I'm getting rid of an expectation when literally the thing I'm saying is I'm going to expect something of myself. That is kind of ironic, but.
No. I get it. Like, anybody who, like our patrons last week would have heard a conversation where I was on the Frank and Dan Diaries talking about my expectations for sort of end of life
for aging.
Because, aging, end of life. And because Dan was talking about his mom and just kind of going through a rough period in her life. Right. And things probably aren't going to get better. Right. And she's had expectations about how she wanted the
end of her life to be.
And it's not there. Right. And I was just like, well, I have like no expectations for it to be good. Yeah. Right? Like, I expect it to be kind of awful, and if it's not the worst thing I'm imagining, I'll be relieved.
That is actually the funny thing about expectations, though. Maybe bad expectations sometimes can be like, oh, that was better than I expected.
It kind of inoculates you against the disappointment.
It does, almost a little bit.
I mean, but that's kind of a different thing. A negative expectation is not what you're talking about. No. And but nonetheless,
So do you have any other resolutions besides the walking?
there are things I want to get done this year, but they're not really
fun ones. Like, is there anything exciting?
I mean, things that we want to do. We want to get a couple trips in.
Yes,
but I'm not getting my hopes up just with everything that's going on. A friend has invited us to go along on a trip to Hawaii, which we'll probably do as long as everything works out.
Yeah.
Another friend wants to take a trip to Europe. I don't know that
one might be a little bit more. Yeah.
That one seems that one's a little tougher to gauge. To figure out. But I think the Hawaii one will work. Will work out, and we'll get to go and have some warm weather. Probably, hopefully, like April-ish.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Or March.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, that would be a great time to go.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Get out of cold Utah. But no, like the work on yourself stuff. I don't know. I kind of have this thing in general lately where I try to be nice and I try to be good, and I try not to lose my shit like I used to.
That's great.
And that's just kind of like the always on my mind.
Yeah,
and I
awareness.
think it's pretty all encompassing.
Yeah.
And so they don't have these little tiny things. And otherwise, I don't let a lot of things really bother me. What was last year? 2021 was a rough year for...
It was a rough year for almost everyone.
Yeah. You know, but like our house flooded and my dog died. And like there was some...
It was a hard one. It was a hard one for sure.
And in the moment, those are hard. But then I kind of just always bounce back.
Move back easily.
And keep up my low expectations.
There you go.
And it's really, honestly, like, I love that you're... Yeah. I wish you all the best in low expectations because it's working. It's been working great for me.
It's been great for you. I'm excited I will have to do like a report back at the end of the year and let you know how it's going.
Since I've set my expectations low, life has been so much happier and better.
I'm telling you,
Contentment. I'm so... Like, people are always, well, boy, we're way off on a tangent, but people are obsessed with the idea of happiness. And I rejected that years ago.
Yeah.
I want contentment.
Interesting. So I'm opposite of you.
Okay.
I'm a happiness person, and my ex-husband was a contentment person.
Oh, really?
And he was always frustrated with me because I wasn't content. But I think I just wasn't content in the same things that he wanted.
There you go.
That was kind of where it butted up against each other. It was like, but I still have like these passions and desires and stuff, and like an excitement that I want to fulfill. And it basically, it seemed like what he was describing to me was just boring. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to get on board with that.
Well, I'll tell you one resolution.
Yes.
And you're a part of it.
What is it?
Photography class.
Yes. And actually, no, we are doing this.
We are?
I'm going to buy, because I'm looking into buying a new camera.
Okay.
And I saw, would you be interested in, you were saying landscape, right?
Yeah, I would love anything, but landscape would be great.
So there's this guy online.
Anyway, let's talk after the show. Let's not get too in the weeds on that. And let's talk when it's all wrapped up. Which, at this point... I think we can wrap up there, right? Or talk about resolutions.
I've got so many more I could list. I've got so many.
Do you want to just rattle some off real quick?
No, they're dumb.
Okay.
I mean, they're like, nobody's going to really care about all my projects. They're just like all these projects. Yeah. And like just get so excited about like, I'm going to do all this stuff.
Well, if you'd like to tell us about your resolutions, dear listener,
yes,
please do.
I would love to hear.
I want to hear what people are working on this year.
Yeah.
Like I really like. I don't know what it is. It's a topic that generally excites me.
It excites me too. It's potential. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love seeing the potential.
Well, write into us. Tell us what you're up to. Podcast at thankgodimatheist.com or call and leave us a voicemail message and tell us about it using your voice.
I want to hear.
I know.
Yeah.
424-666-8442 is the telephone number. And if you would like to join our members only lounges, we have 2 of them.
They're great.
One on Facebook, one on Discord. Go to thankgodimatheist.com/members only, and that's how you get over to that. Big thanks to our supporters. We really can't do it without you, so thanks so much for your support. If you'd like to join them, please go to thankgodimatheist.com and click on the support tab. Other than that, I feel like I skipped something that Dan normally says.
He thanks people who do your music.
The music.
Yeah.
Yes. So we need to thank the Red Rock Hot Club and Gordon Johnston for the use of their music. And thanks to all of you for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.